Welcome back to Muzzle Blast, the official podcast of the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association. This week, we've got a really special guest. We're talking to Bob McBride of the Black Powder TV YouTube channel. If you're not, I guess, connected to the world, which if you're listening to the podcast, I'm sure you watch some YouTube. Bob's been running the Black Powder TV YouTube channel for a while now, and he's been producing a lot of great videos, among them a new shooters series that I think if you're into muzzleloading or just getting started in muzzleloading, you're going to want to check out. Bob's a really interesting guy. It's been neat reading his posts and talking with him a little bit on the American Long Rifles forum. Link to that down in the show notes as well. You need to join that forum and hang out and learn a ton there. I've been kind of nixing social media in the evenings and replacing it with the ALR forum, and I'm learning a ton. So check out the forum. I hope you enjoy this episode. Bob's a really great guy, getting out there, sharing muzzleloading, sharing black powder, and having fun doing it. Enjoy the show, and I'll catch you at the end. This podcast is brought to you by THOR Bullets. THOR Bullets are a premium full-bore muzzleloader bullet designed specifically for modern inline rifles. THOR Bullets do not require plastic sabots or belts to be fired, meaning less cleaning for you between shots. The patented copper base creates an airtight seal, giving you greater distance and accuracy. THOR's unique engineering allows the bullets to retain 95% of their weight upon impact, and the controlled expansion ensures large, easy-to-follow blood trails. THOR bullets are currently available in a 50 caliber version that is sized to your specific bore. THOR is also expanding into a new 45 caliber bullet designed for faster 1 in 24 and 1 in 22 twist inline rifles. For more information on these great bullets, visit www.thorbullets.com. We'd like to thank THOR Bullets for their sponsorship of this podcast.
So it sounds like we kind of live in a similar kind of way.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm probably much smaller, but I've got a little homestead, I guess is what I call it. And you're a big operator compared to me.
Well, it's kind of a hobby farm, really, more than anything. But
yeah,
it's big enough that, we've got sort of almost separate areas, like where the garden and all that is. You can't see it from the house or anywhere else. Got to take a trail up, walking trail or a four-wheeler drive up. And so that's kind of like a little oasis all its own, and so it's big enough that we can kind of do that, have everything separated and where you can't. It's almost like little different other separate little farms almost.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's wonderful. We love it. Just quiet, 30 miles from the nearest town, the nearest decent sized town. We're 10 miles from, 2,000 population town, but yeah, it's quiet, man. No cars, no honking, no noise, no traffic jams. I went to University of Houston and lived in Houston. I was born there. I was born north of Houston, about 30 miles, but I spent most of my career there.
Okay.
And the commute, the thing about Houston is like LA. It's 100 miles of sprawl.
Yeah.
So you kind of pick a side to live on. So you're not driving through it all the time.
Right.
But it's still, it's 12, 14 lane wide highways and everybody's doing 90. 1,000 horns honking at once.
Yeah.
And, just brutal. I hated every minute of it.
Yeah. You've got a big change compared to that now for sure.
Yeah. And that was I kind of look at that as like the oddity in my life, because growing up in Alaska, real rural, like I did, that was way more rural than I'm living now, which is like as rural as you can get almost in the States.
Right.
But being in Alaska and the way we lived there, Dad was a big hunter and trapper. And I mean, that 100%, hunting in winter trap lines and fishing. And, that was his thing. So that's what I did too.
So do you think, I guess, to kind of segue into what we're talking about, is that kind of was your upbringing a real influence to you then as to what you're doing now with kind of your small farm? And
yeah for sure dad was give you a little example. We moved to Alaska probably 4 or 5 times a year. We would fly up to the Brooks Range or drive to the Yukon River and do a 2-3 week hunt. And that's from the time I was 7, 8 years old.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've got, I got little pictures where I'd get my little disposable camera and being in the camp and with my little axe and cutting stuff down, cutting brush down for the fire, just that's how I grew up, and it wasn't just the hunting, it was day to day. We were super rural. So, I was 7 years old. I got my first 22, probably 9, 10, got my first 20 gauge single shot break barrel shotgun. So I'd get out of school, the books would get dropped and I'd grab one or the other, a pocket full of shells, and off I went,
Yeah.
And we had snowmobile and 3-wheeler and stuff. And so, I was 10 years old and I could be 20 miles down the river, in the winter it's frozen over. It's just like an empty highway for a kid. So, that's exactly, when I left Alaska, my parents were up there for 35 years or something. But when I left, I went to the Marine Corps and then got out and went to Houston and then from there to Tennessee.
Okay.
But that's, sort of I'm really surprised that I never moved back to Alaska. It just kind of never happened for me. But this is kind of the closest thing and I love it. Yeah. So big influence, Dad was always in the garage reloading, and he never was into muzzleloaders or black powder, even though he's got he's tons of guns just like I do, but he has a Thompson Center Hawken, and he's got an old custom plains rifle from the 70s. So it's part of his thing too, but it's just as part of the general shooting thing,
right.
He's got his 30-06 and his shotguns and, his muzzle loaders, and it's just part of his thing. And that's the way it was for me in the beginning. It was just part of my, hunting and shooting sort of lifestyle. And that goes all the way back. My grandfather was that way. It was just a big part of our life.
Yeah. I think anybody that's kind of semi-self-reliant, is that way, even if you're not into just muzzleloading. If you're into firearms at all, I think you're also interested in our history, and the muzzleloaders really tie in with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge thing, and that's what I studied in college, history, and
okay,
was
cool.
always, so I was always into that. And, from the time I was, my grandmother and grandfather would send me Louis L'Amour books, which were Westerns. And, from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, when we were in Alaska and they were in Texas, and they would read one and then send it to me, and I would read them. I read them all. By the time I was, probably 10 years old, I'd read every one he ever wrote probably 8 times,
That's
just
awesome.
into the history and all of that. So I've always been into that. And that's part of, what brought me kind of here is just the history of it all. I metal detect, and our farm was, just to go into this real quick, the Civil War is a big focus of mine too. And, our farm was occupied by the Union Army during the Civil War. They occupied our county because this little county was famous for guerrilla attacks on Union convoys and stuff after they had taken Tennessee. So the Ohio Volunteer Militia spent 1.5 years on our farm to try to pacify this county during the war.
Wow.
So one of our front pastures is where the creek runs through, and that's where the cavalry was picketed for 2 full seasons. So I get up there, metal detect, and mini balls and buttons and cavalry tack and all of that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
When you said that you were near the, Cumberland, I was thinking, oh, that's so cool. You're right where, the long hunters and the early settlers went through to break into like kind of the first part of the West, but you're also connected to the Civil War. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. My sister and them live in Knoxville area, and that's like real close to the first settled areas when they came across, through the gap. So that's kind of that early part. And then, of course, this area is exactly where the Union Army invaded Tennessee from Ohio and Pennsylvania. So lots of Civil War history here. One of the big battles of the war, the Battle of Stones River, was held in was fought in Murfreesboro, which is just 35 miles away.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've metal detected all the private land that that battle happened on.
Oh, really?
You know, because the Union and Confederate lines were, 4 miles long or something, and during that battle, and so the right wing and the left wing of the armies on the east side were. That's all private land. You know, the battlefield site isn't that big anymore. It's 100 acres or something.
Right.
So, so metal detecting and, history, and that takes you right into muzzleloaders if you're going anywhere with it.
Yeah.
And I did have the first, and I've been into muzzleloaders seriously, like 10 to 20 pounds of powder a year, seriously, for 10 or 12 years. But prior to that, I had a 1853 infield, an original that I hunted with. Yeah. And I loved it. It was just part of my gun collection, and I hunted with it and shot it and all of that. But that's probably, what got me into muzzleloaders the way I am now is that infield, that 53 infield, and metal detecting. Because I would shoot when I'd find a Confederate 5.77 mini ball metal detecting, I'd shoot it.
Oh, really?
Out of my infield. Yeah. And that's like mind blowing,
Yeah.
To have an original, and, it's not a proven Confederate infield, but it was an infield. Most of them were used by the South.
Yeah.
But you find a dropped mini ball, 10 or 12 inches in the ground at the side of an actual documented battlefield, or at the site of, a winter camp for some cavalry.
Yeah.
And find it, and it's in perfect condition, and you've got the gun that shoots it.
Why not?
So, boy, yeah, exactly. So the perfect condition ones that I found, the drops, oh yeah, they're in my berm at the range.
Oh, that's so cool. I've listened to a lot of connections to history, but that has got to be one of the most intimate connections to history I've heard on the show.
Well, and intimate is the right word, because there's something tangible when you're metal detecting and what is there, or you're trying to find where something is. Like for years, I was looking for winter camps, or small camps that were based on the official documents of the Civil War should be on this farm somewhere.
Yeah. And
so I'd search this farm until you find it, and you find the campfires, and you find the swag where they threw bullets into the fire, or carved chess pieces out of mini balls, and you find that stuff, and then you can almost see the camp, because you find a 2 or 3, 4 fires, you find their privy, you find where all the horse tack, there's an area as big as a living room that's got horse tack all over the place, so they picketed there. Yeah. And boy, that's tangible, that's tangible stuff. And I just love that.
Even up here, I'm in northern Indiana, and you don't really think about it being much of a Civil War active area, but we found several buttons and little bits and pieces here and there that are, or coins even from that time. Right. And it's neat when you find that stuff and you just remember what was here before. Right.
It's very cool. And that reminds me of that the day I remember the day I found the first mini ball that I shot out of that infield, that was in perfect condition, that gave me the idea to shoot it, was the same day. And it was on the line for the Battle of Stones River. And that same day I found an 1804 Spanish silver dollar, pieces of $8. That was about an inch in the ground. And it was next to a tree, so it had been pushed up by that tree. Okay. Almost to the surface, as that tree grew in the roots, and it just kind of lifted it up out of the ground. But the neat thing about that is that Spanish silver dollar was it was a fake. It was a period counterfeit. So they did that a lot, where they would shave a little off, make it lighter than it should be. But it was a perfectly marked. It was just light. It was like 5% lighter than it should have been. I did all that research and found out that was a big thing. And people weighed them because even though, the Spanish silver dollar was basically the U.S. silver dollar in the early period. And there was cheating going on back then, and so it was really neat to find a counterfeit silver dollar. You find all kinds of stuff metal detecting. It's wonderful. Yeah.
So have you found any other muzzleloading related items?
Yeah, I found Springfield locks, lock parts, hammers. I found bayonets and stock rings, all kinds of stuff like that. A lot of muzzleloader stuff, mainly day-to-day military related stuff.
Right.
So, so like you say, buttons, uniform buttons that's an awesome thing to find, because that's an easy visual too, right? Like they're taking their coat off or putting it on, pop a button, and then you find it all these years later.
So you had your 1853 Enfield, and what pushed you then to get into muzzleloading? I mean, I guess closer to where you are now, where you have, I don't even know how many, muzzleloaders and things, but you've got quite a few, and you're really into them now.
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't know. I have 20 or so, probably only maybe 10 have been on the channel. I've got 58 Remingtons and 1860 Armies and stuff that I haven't done anything on with the show. But I think it was really the day I decided to start shooting those out of that, because I had bought 5.77s and I had made my own.
Yeah.
And so I shot it pretty regular. But when I started shooting the originals, and then I don't know, it was almost like something clicked, and I was like, man, I gotta shoot this more. And so, and I had hunted with it some, but I started hunting with it more about that same time. And then I think within a couple of weeks of shooting that first original, I had a Mike Brooks flintlock. So it just kind of almost flipped a switch, because I shot so much. I shot 3-gun competition. So that's cool. Shooting ARs and shotguns and pistols and target transition and speed and all of that. And so that took up most of my range time. But I'd always spent 3, 4, 5 days a week at the range.
Wow.
And so that kind of, with that experience shooting that original drop out of that infield, sort of triggered me over, and I got another flintlock, I got my first flintlock, and then I love that so much. I love the idea that it wasn't inferior to a cap lock. Practically speaking, it's got a 10th of a second or 100th of a second more delay, but it's imperceptible if you load it and shoot it right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you got your lock tuned, it's.
Yeah, exactly. And this Mike Brooks, the lock was just so fast, and I was like, man, this thing is awesome. And it was lucky that I got a gun like that as my first one versus something else, with a lock, not a chambers lock, that sort of thing. And I fell in love with it, and I was like, well, I got to get a smoothbore because I can turkey hunt with this, and got a smoothbore. And then it's like, well, here's a 58 that I've got, but I need a 36 because how am I going to shoot squirrels with this? And it just like this within 6 months, I probably had 6, like to cover all my bases.
Right.
Yeah. And I still, modern hunted some at that point because, there's some things you just can't, you can't go with 4 or 5 buddies duck hunting and take your muzzleloader, sitting in the blind, you're going to get a rash from them. But,
right.
But 99% within 6 months, 99% of my hunting was done muzzleloader. And I hunt archery too. And, but as soon as muzzleloader kicks off here in Tennessee, which is all, that's 2 months of muzzleloader and rifle here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it almost flipped. It was hard. I was sitting here thinking today, it was kind of the whole question of how did you get into muzzleloaders? And I was kind of mulling that over, and it's so complicated because it wasn't a sort of a going with a buddy to the range and he brings his muzzleloader and you're blown away.
Right.
It was this long transition because I knew about them before I shot my first black powder gun. I could tell you everything you wanted to know about 1842 Springfields, Harper's Ferry, and 1861 Springfields, all of them. And so I was kind of already there just from my love of history and the Civil War. So yeah, the transition to actually being crazy about them was quick, and it didn't feel like that was the beginning. That's when you kind of think about the question, and it's like, well, it's like not even really the beginning when I got that 53 so long ago, and I guess it was sort of the beginning when I got that Mike Brooks gun.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it's 100%. My other stuff is relegated to defensive and closet duty and, gun safe duty.
Yeah.
Cause now I've got the pistols and all of it, so all my bases are covered, and I get so much, so many requests and, how do you do this and do a video on this? And, that it kind of keeps me going too. Like, I need to get the smoothbores out and test, loads more or whatever.
There's so much, I think muzzleloaders can be so much more personal than a lot of modern firearms. I mean, I'm the same way. I've got muzzleloaders and I've got modern firearms, but doing something with a muzzleloader, it takes more time and it takes more involvement. I was watching some videos earlier today, and a modern firearms YouTube channel was sharing a new flintlock that he'd gotten, and he was going through all of the stuff that you needed for the flintlock, and he just mentioned that, it's not like a modern firearm where you get a box of ammo and you go to the range. And I had never put that together because I've just been around muzzleloaders so much.
Right.
But it really clicks how different they are, but how much, I think, more involved you become with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you've got to know them sort of inside and out to get the best from them. And my favorite part about it is you get dirty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can go all day to the range and shoot whatever you want and not, go to the bathroom and wash your hands. But you go all day to the range with a muzzleloader and you're head to toe.
Yep.
Mama's got you field stripping outside. Yeah. And that's a big thing I love about it, just getting dirty with it. But yeah, it's all the things that come together and the stuff you carry. And then, if you're into history, which most people are that are into muzzleloaders, then it's how did they manage all of this stuff on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a range box and a box,
right.
3 boxes of stuff. They had
a pickup truck full.
Exactly. They had a little bag and a horn, and it was hanging on a peg by the door. And they grabbed it when it was time to go out and hunt or whatever they did. So yeah, that's another big part of it with me is just how this was done practically.
Yeah.
In history, because it wasn't, it's easy to go to the range with your box and load from the bench and do all that. And if target shooting and competition is your thing, then that's, that's what you do. That's part of that.
Right.
But the way I do it, which is, I walk out of my door with my muzzleloader in my bag and my horn, just like they would have. And it's hanging on a peg, just like they had theirs. Of course, they didn't have 10 of them with 10 different bags and all that hanging. Right. But, and that's why I have all the bags, because I like a bag and a horn to be loaded with the stuff for that gun.
Yeah.
And nothing else. So I grab the gun off the rack and I grab the bag and the horn, and then I'm heading off into the woods. If it's squirrel hunting, then that's what I've got. I've got all the things I need to squirrel hunt, and nothing more, because they wouldn't have carried all that extra stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even down to like a range rod, that becomes something that they wouldn't have necessarily had,
No. And it's necessary for us, in the sense that, thinking about our bore and thinking about not breaking the rod and all of that. but that kind of gets into that, how they manage that, because you learn how to use the rod that comes on the gun that was made on the gun, then you're not gonna break it. You know, it's hand over hand. You're not reaching way up,
right, and
grabbing 2 feet above the muzzle when you shove it down. You know, you're pushing it down there almost hand over hand. You know, within the foot above the bore.
Yeah.
To take care of it, because you don't want to break it. And that's exactly the thought they would have had. I don't want to break it, so I need to do this correctly.
Yeah. I can't go out and just get a new one. I've got to make a new one, and that takes up time that's needed
exactly.
for other things.
Right. They didn't have time to break one. Exactly right. So that's one of the things I love about muzzleloading specifically, but history in general is especially, and that's one of the things I love about what's that YouTube channel? The Townsend's, right?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Oh man, I mean, he's into that kind of same way I am into the, you know, well, there is a way they did this, and it wasn't just any old way. It was the most economical and straightforward way. Yeah, and I love finding those. Doesn't matter what it is, any little accoutrement, anything. Yeah. There's a best practice, and we don't necessarily know what all those best practices were.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I mean, for your average person who might not be into history as much as we might be, I mean, I think a lot of people just look at it as the way that we did things before the modern era was just harder because we didn't know how to do it the way we're doing it now. But there was centuries and centuries of reasoning as to why and how they did those things. And to me, that's just fascinating that you had people living out of small bags that they had to carry out in the woods, you know, or had a little cabin somewhere, and they were making it work is just incredible. And then you had the economy of the towns and things around it and the different trades and skills. I mean, it gets real deep real fast, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. And they did it the same. They had the best practices down for 200 years. Yeah. You know, things didn't change in one generation like they do today. Yeah. You know, the generation older than me and the generation younger than me has zero in common. Yeah. And today, but back then they were the same. You learn from Grandpa because he's been around the longest and knew exactly how to do it the best way. Yeah. You know, so yeah, that is a fascinating part of that period and muzzleloaders and my big fascination, which, you know, because I carry them in the way that they were carried, in the sense that I take them off the hook and I walk out in the woods. Yeah. And so, you know, I'm thinking about that all the time. Like, I don't need this, right. You know, even if I'm a half mile away and something happens, well, that just kind of ends my squirrel hunt. Like if I break a mainspring or something, right. You know, then I'm just going to be walking the half mile home and looking at the squirrels that are laughing at me in the trees, right?
Chucking nuts at you.
Game over until you get home. That's what would have happened with them. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, outside of the history part of it, which is sort of my core thing. I just love the, and you mentioned this earlier, just the tangible nature of muzzleloading and the hands-on, you know, and Dad and I had a conversation about this a few months ago because he was a big reloader and, you know, reloaded every round he ever shot and, you know, for a long period of his life. And so we were talking about muzzleloading and how every time you load one, you're reloading that round right there. Yeah. You know, so there may be 2 best loads for this gun and you're going to load it the way, what you need for what you're doing. You know, you may need a hotter load if you're going to set for coyotes or longer range target shooting. And then you need an accurate light load. Yeah. Possibly for this gun if it's a multi-purpose gun. And so you're loading it the way you've learned is the best load for that gun in that moment. And that sort of kind of connected with him because he did that with all of his guns, his 243s and his wildcatters that he would load so hot they were within a grain of disintegrating halfway down range. Right. You know, so he kind of got that and appreciated that part of, and I think that's what he likes about muzzle loading. And he's not, you know, into history like we are, but he does love, you know, muzzle loading deer season and that's kind of the part he likes, that he's building a load that's just the perfect load. And that's right up his alley.
I think everybody loves muzzleloading when it gets them a couple extra weeks in the woods.
Exactly. And that's a big, that's a big part of the new people coming into it's really interesting. The new people coming into muzzleloading, a big chunk of them are coming in just for muzzleloading deer season.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all they're interested in.
Yeah. That's all. That's it. And what's interesting about that too, and I see this a lot with the YouTube channel, is a certain percentage of them are coming in and they're going down to Bass Pro Shop and buying a modern inline with a scope and all that. Mm-hmm. The least possible differences, right? Just barely different enough so they can shoot it during that season than their modern gun. But then there's this whole other group that are coming in and they're more interested in the fact that it's an old technology, not necessarily kind of coming to flintlocks, but they're coming to muzzleloader deer and thinking, well, yeah, those modern ones are fine, but I got ones just like it that are, cartridge guns. So what about this Thompson Center, Hawken? And so those are kind of the ones that kind of are heading my direction generally, which is neat because, what do I got to say to a guy who's going to shoot a modern inline, except convince him this is a superior way to go.
Right.
That's my challenge there. But the guys that are like, man, I just got into this and just went down to, Cabela's and picked up this TC Hawken and I don't know which end is which.
Right.
Those are kind of my consumers sort of, which is fun. And I get tons and tons of questions because I give out my email address.
Oh, okay.
I have a Bob at Black Powder TP, and I kind of every third video mention it. So I probably get, 5 on average a day. And a lot of them are like 3-paragraph, intricate questions. Yeah.
Because it's not something, I think generally it's not simple. There's a lot more things that can be off or different or need tuning or what have you over, my Ruger 1022, the trigger isn't working. I need to go to their website and buy the new trigger spring, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of those, like I just bought this, Lyman Great Plains rifle and it won't stay at full cock, And so it's like, ooh, boy, this could be a complicated, long email exchange, because it's going to be inlet too tight and wood is in the way. Some wood needs to be taken out of the lock inlet and you don't have any idea where. So you almost have to walk them through this whole complicated, thing to try to figure out what it is. But I do enjoy that part about it. I enjoy, and that's kind of why I started the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Is just and because I've got tons of nephews, and they come to the farm, and they want to spend 5 minutes shooting the ARs, and then they want to get the black powder guns out.
Oh, that's great.
And so I'm always kind of walking kids from 8 or 9 to 12 or 14 through the muzzleloaders. And that kind of was like, man, that is neat. It's real neat to teach somebody something like that. And that's so alien. And so that I kind of started the YouTube channel with the idea of the new shooter series, kind of instructional how-tos, because I thought that was a useful thing that wasn't represented anywhere.
It's like really not.
No, it's not. And so that was the idea. And I think Art Fleener started that whole idea. I can't remember if I had the conversation with him or if it was on ALR and we were talking in a same thread. I don't recall, but it was a conversation about getting new people into the sport. And, I think we were talking about it in relation to the NMLRA and all of that. And that's kind of where the idea was born in that conversation with him about, man, I could, do a YouTube channel. Yeah. And do some how-tos and show some shooting and stuff. And then there's lots of kids on YouTube. A lot of kids on YouTube that go to gun channels. Yeah. Shooting channels. And so yeah, that's kind of what started it. But it's kind of grown from there. You know, I'm kind of the smallest, probably, black powder YouTube channel, the newest, certainly.
Oh,
but,
yes, definitely.
Yeah, but I think I filled a pretty good niche with and you know, Mike Bellevue does a lot of how-to stuff and all of that, but and I watched all of his videos before I started, and I think I'd watched them before I even considered starting it.
Right.
Most all of them, especially his flintlock stuff. But
he's kind of I think, really the trailblazer for muzzleloading on YouTube.
Dog. Yeah. Yeah. But I admired his stuff so much and learned so much that's kind of how I based it. I based it kind of on his channel with the idea of the new shooter series being a separate and primary playlist.
Yeah.
Where the content of the video was narrow and it was in the title. Versus sort of, which most channels do, is that, you know, the how to adjust the trigger is in
something else.
It's in the middle of another video on something, and there's really no way. You have to watch them all to find some small little niche thing. And that's what kind of my idea was, is I can title all of these little niche things that people really have questions about into their own little video, and just kind of, you know, 30, 40 videos wouldn't be a problem. And that'd be a helpful list of videos for new shooters.
Yeah. You're really getting, you know, elbow deep in something and able to discuss it. And then, like you were saying, it opens up those emails that you're getting then. And that just kind of keeps that ball rolling of answering more questions and really benefiting the sport, I think.
Yeah, I like to think so. I really, it's interesting about that is the more of those videos that I've done, the more questions I get from the new shooters, because they're being sent to my new shooter series playlist from all these forums. You know, hey, I'm a new guy here, you know, well, welcome. Go to Black Powder TV and look at his new shooter series. And that's happening more and more often.
Good.
So I'm getting more and more questions back that's slightly different than what I thought maybe the question might be. And then, so I'm running a sort of a full list of 20 or 30 video ideas at any one time. And it's coming from the feedback that I'm getting.
Yeah.
You know, well, I did this video, but it might be more helpful to do one that's more focused on this, that's a little bit different than what I did, because it sort of leaves out this 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 questions that I've gotten over the last few months. And so I just kind of keep this list of 10 or 15 videos, video ideas, and adjust them as I get another question. Oh, that's a great question, and I didn't think about it for this video idea. And so the questions sort of tune the focus of the new shooter, the next videos coming along in the new shooter series, which is nice. It's sort of a self-fulfilling thing. All I have to do is sort of sit down and make them. The concepts are kind of coming at me now, which is nice, you know, because early on I'm sitting there going, okay, so how do I load one? You know, there's like, I could think of 5 ideas, you know, but now there's hundreds of ideas, and that's questions coming from people that are brand new, that I'm so far removed from that I didn't think that would be a question, but it's an obvious question.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's neat. That new shooter series is kind of up and running, and I get a lot of questions from it, which is great.
Well, I really appreciate your videos. I'm a religious watcher. I think that when it comes to muzzleloading and black powder online, there are kind of these different camps is how I think about them, but they're all, people move from camp to camp and are always learning and always doing kind of their own thing. And that's something I really like about the black powder community, is there's a million ways to do something, and everybody's open to sharing or telling you how they're doing it and bringing new people along. And that's something I really appreciate about your channel. I know on our website, because that's a huge void right now, is getting started in muzzleloading. And it's not something that we're in a great position to do. And at this time with the crazy year that it's been, and
Right.
on our getting started links, I have your videos in that playlist of here are the people you need to go watch to go learn about this stuff, because you're answering those questions, and you've built this little machine to to help serve those new shooters. And I thank you for that, because you're doing a great service.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and it's getting more fun as it goes along, because you just get that feedback, and then you want to go, man, I want to go make this video,
Yeah. It's
whether
energizing.
it is. It's, you're kind of spinning your wheels early on trying to get some sort of traction, not like viewership traction, but
Right.
traction on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. You're kind of shotgunning at first. And then, so as the focus narrows down, it makes it easier on me. And a lot more fun, and a lot less mentally, taxing.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's getting to the point where I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Well, good.
Yeah. Meeting people. It's amazing the people I've met locally,
Really?
that they either see me, and I've had this happen just a few weeks ago, see me in a gun store and say Black Powder TV, like right out of the blue, in my home, basically in my hometown,
Wow.
which like blew me away. And then, of course I get that at the long rifle shows and stuff, but I've also met people, which is nice, that have contacted me through Black Powder TV. And then as we get to talking about whatever their question is on the email, they tell me, well, I'm in Nashville or Murfreesboro or one of the towns close by. So, I mean, in the last month, there's been two guys that live in Murfreesboro, 30 miles from me, that I've went and had lunch with when I, called them up. Okay, I'm going to be in Murfreesboro, so we'll meet up for lunch at, the local restaurant and shoot the breeze for an hour. And that's been kind of, interesting as well, and I had fun with that. I one guy I met in Murfreesboro, bought a couple traditional knives from him. He said, hey, I got some stuff I think you'd be interested in, And so we meet up for lunch, and he's like, hey, check these out. I'm like, dude, that is cool. I want that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's not necessarily entirely a long distance sort of thing. It's kind of morphed into a little bit of, not entirely just me making videos and uploading them to YouTube.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting. It's been a really interesting thing, and I've had a lot of fun doing it.
For a limited time, you can enter to win a 15-pack of THOR Bullets. That's a $30 to $34 value. Visit thorbullets.com/NMLRA to fill out the form and enter to win. Cool. I wanted to circle back. I really appreciate you kind of going into talking about YouTube a lot, because I think people are really interested in kind of the behind the scenes stuff of that. And you've covered that very well. So I really appreciate that. But I wanted to circle back to the question too, about if you're comfortable with it, talking a little bit about your collection and some of your favorite pieces, periods, builders, or craftspeople.
Yeah. My main focus, and the guns and the accoutrements that I like the most are sort of the everyman stuff, and I love some of the builders that make the English Fowlers that a landed gentry, would have had.
Yeah.
4 of them. You know what I mean? It's like, but my people would have gone to jail if they laid a finger on one.
Yeah.
And I love those guns, and I love seeing them at the shows, but sort of plausibly that one of my ancestors would have had. And that's the stuff that interests me. And my people were farmers, and all the way back till they came over.
Do you have any family muzzleloaders, just out of curiosity?
No, I don't. Family guns in droves, grandpa's 1800s, 30 and all of that, but no muzzleloaders passed down, which is a shame. I'd give my right arm for that almost.
Right. Yeah. It's something wonderful to have if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and I envy those guys, This is my great grandfather's. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
how awesome would that be? My collection, it kind of focuses on sort of the simple stuff. My favorite guns are Southern Mountain type.
Mm-hmm.
That's my kind of number one on the list. And my favorite builder of those guns is Jack Dupre. And I've got one of his Saudi Daisy Tennessee guns and East Tennessee gun. And he just gets that sort of, he builds them in a way, kind of like Eric Kittenberg is another one of my favorites who patinas them.
Yeah.
Believably. And Jack's Southern guns are, instead of being representative of a gun that you would have gone to the gun maker and bought, because that would have only happened in my family, my ancestors, once every 2 or 3 generations, right? Most of my ancestors would have carried grandpa's gun, and made it work throughout their life. So it would have been an older gun. And so he makes these that are just beautiful. Like it would have been like the rifle your dad would have got when he was old enough to get his first gun, or it would have been grandpa's second gun later in his life, that sort of thing. So those are my very favorites, Southern guns with some age on them. And, and second, and all of them are simple. I like simple guns, long rifles. So Eric Kittenberg, I've got a couple of his, and I love his stuff. He's got that sort of artistic sort of vision that's, Ian Pratt and those guys have, just kind of mind blowing artistic vision on what a long rifle could or did look like. Mostly could have looked like.
Yeah. They're bringing in the art to it.
Right. Yeah. Just like Ian Pratt's and his painted guns and that sort of thing, just kind of mind blowing. But so yeah, Eric Kittenberg, kind of a long nose, and he's got one of my 12 bores that he built in about 2000 that he's redoing because he didn't like the story that it told. It was a simple barn gun. And so he wants to put some, 2 or 3 iterations of its life, like adding a butt plate and adding, a side plate that wasn't originally made on it. That's the way Eric Kittenberg does. Okay. So I just sent it to him and said, do your thing. So if he's listening, I'd like him to hurry up and get it back. So I got a couple of his Mike Brooks guns. I love Mike Brooks, a sort of working man, believable, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of that, you got to get out so many guns per year to make your living, back in those days. So it was done methodically well, but not a whole lot more time spent on it, engraving or whatever, than would have been practical in the day. So that's kind of, Mike stays within those constraints, which I love about his stuff. Yeah. And, getting the gun in and out of the shop versus a commission that I don't care what it costs, make me the most beautiful gun in town. Yeah. I mean, those are, I like what you said there. You got to build so many guns a year, and it's part of your job. It's how you put food on the table. I think that's a really good place to put it, because it's not that it's a lesser gun, because it's not that ornate. It's a different class of those kind of guns, and it has a place, because that's what people had, and what those smiths had to do. Right. And that was the relationship between a gun buyer and a gun maker in those days. I'm making guns. I've got to make so many per year. Tell me what you want, and I'll get it to you as fast as I can. And you'll get the engraving that came on the lock plate from the barrel, and I'll do this and that for you if that's what you want. Yeah. But let me know what you want, because I got stuff to do. So that's kind of Mike Brooks, and that's what I love about his stuff. His guns sort of exude that. I'm trying to think of the term; it's just left me. But I'm sure there'll be a comment somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Somebody will mention it. But anyway, it's that sort of get it in and out, and I'm not cutting quality at all, or the quality of the work. It's just, it's done in a practical manner. So that's what I love about Mike's stuff. And I've owned several of his guns, and I love them. Jack Brooks is another of my favorite. Been around a long time. Love his guns. Have one of his right now, a Carolina Type G Carolina gun that he made. Alan Martin is another guy. He makes that simple gun, right? That's he's famous for. He can make a beautiful ornate gun, but his shimmels, he's famous for that. And so I've got two of his guns. John Newcomer, early Lancaster shimmel in 58 that I love, big early gun. And then I've got what he calls kind of a shimmel plus. It's a shimmel, but with a butt plate, basically. And it's he made it as a 45, but the barrel's been shot out, so it's being bored out right now. Actually, the barrel is getting bored out to a 50.
Oh, cool.
So I got Alan Martin. I got two of his. I love his stuff. I have a Kibler SMR. I love what Jim Kibler's doing.
I've got one of those on order right now.
Yeah. They're so sleek and slender. Just, it's a Southern gun. It's my favorite type of gun. So I had to get one, and I got one very early on. So I love that. I've got a Lowhar. So yeah, just kind of a little bit of everybody, but it's sort of the thread of my collection is simple workman. That's it. Workman-like manner. Mike Brooks built in a workman-like manner, right? That's the term for what Mike Brooks does. But anyway, the just simple guns, that's my collection is sort of focused on that.
Yeah.
I don't have any with, 10 pounds of brass on it, even though I do love those guns, to look at them, but they would be probably what they were to the guys who own them. There's a lot of argument about this, but it was a high-end gun. Yeah. It was a high-end gun even back then. But yeah, the simple stuff. And that's where my collection lies, the simple guns, not necessarily cheap guns today, but just the simple lines. And when you get rid of all the, like Alan Martin's guns, when you get rid of all the ornate stuff, that the architecture has to carry the day, right? Yeah. And his guns are so sexy and perfect, and they just flow. Yeah, that work. To me, Al's he's a genius. He's like Eric Kittenberg to me, just kind of a mad genius. And so that's pretty much it. Outside of, that's my flintlocks, and kind of what I like in a flintlock and what I collect in a flintlock, but. I've got like 30% of my collection that rotates all the time. Okay. One of the guys on ALR will call me and say, dude, you still have this gun? Yeah. What do you think about trading this for that? And so I trade so much sometimes. And like I'm at the tail end of that phase right now that I've actually got 3 gun crates in my shop just leaning against the wall because they're coming and going. And right. That's usually a pretty stable collection, but this has been a year, I guess. We're all bored sitting around that I've done a lot of swapping. Yeah.
Getting something new in the shop.
Yeah. Getting something new in. And, it has been a crazy year. I haven't done anything on the workbench, building wise, but, I've done some stuff, but it's just been a nutty year. I took my Kibler SMR. I bought it as a 36, and I called Jim, and he had an older one of the old rice barrels in 45. So I bought it from him and changed my 36 SMR to a 45. So now I have 2 barrels for my Kibler. Yeah. So I've done some little stuff like that, but it has been a nutty year.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm putting together for a video right now, a St. Louis Hawken Traditions kit. As kind of a primer for me. I put together an old CVA kit many years ago, and this was kind of my first foray back into it. And it's been nice being able to unplug, take care of things in the morning, and go down in the afternoon in the shop and just work with my hands and try to figure that out, just to kind of separate from the rest of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. I do love gun building too. I haven't built too many of them, 5 or 6, kind of from start to finish. I've done 3 or 4 where I found some old one built in the 70s with terrible architecture, way too much wood left on it, and reshaped it and done that. I've done that a bunch of times, but built a few kits, a few pistols, But I mean, that's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy making the parts for them. I had the most fun with that Kidler kit, because I made the nose cap for it. I made the ramrod pipes for it, custom pipes. Did a lot of custom work on that gun and enjoyed that. I do enjoy that part of it.
So you're, I think, one of the people right now that has your finger on the pulse of muzzleloading. And I think in some ways you're maybe even guiding it as well to a new generation. But where do you see it going, in the next 5-10 years?
Boy, that's a tough one. And I don't know. I know it's, there's some challenges, there's some challenges as far as, the kind of the future of hunting in general, sort of the future of guns in general, and the perception of both of those things generally. I think there's challenges there. Challenges bending the curve upwards.
Yeah.
But I think surprisingly there's a surprising number more than what I thought there. I'm not saying that right. Surprisingly, there's more people getting into the sport than I thought there was. You know what I mean? I kind of thought early on that it was kind of bare bones and a few here and a few there, but like what we talked about before about the people getting into it for the deer season, for the muzzleloader deer season, that's a smaller percentage of the ones I'm seeing than I thought it would be.
Yes. So
I thought, well, that's going to be 75-85% of all new people getting into muzzleloading, but it's sort of not.
Yeah. There's an audience that is into hunting, and then there's an audience that I think is into muzzleloading. And that's not to degrade the guys who pick up an inline to get an extra 2 weeks. I mean, right. I'm glad that you're getting a muzzleloader and you're trying out something new. I mean, that's right. If you want to learn more about it, I'm here and let's learn about it. But I'm right there with you that they're really just looking for that extra couple weeks. And right. There's a lot of other people interested in the history and the other stuff with it.
And that's a bigger percentage than I thought it was. And so that gives me some hope, that there's enough new people coming along that to keep this all going. And so I think there are enough new people coming into it with sort of the history and the tradition in mind to keep it all going. But it's like, man, the guys who are in their 70s and 80s now, that was a boom. That was a huge boom. Jeremiah Johnson and all of that stuff. And matching that, I think is going to be tough. Do we need to, I actually think that the Revenant had a lot to do with the spike we've seen in the last year or so.
I think that as far as historical, sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah.
As far as historic movies go, I think that has definitely been one of the better ones as far as accurate portrayal and as garnering interest, because it brought a whole new level of that era to film and to people.
Yeah, I was excited when I saw it because it had that Jeremiah Johnson sort of feel, the protagonist that was, you kind of were compelled by his story and his flintlock and what he was carrying and his son, his Native American son and that sort of whole thing. I thought I thought, man, this could have a little bit of a kick like Jeremiah Johnson for sort of our hobby. And I think it has. I don't think it was as obvious as like Jeremiah Johnson and that sort of thing. But I think we're going to look back and see that it had gave a bit of a bump, but I don't know, I don't know. I think I'm sort of happy to see the number of people that are coming into black powder that aren't necessarily coming from traditional hunting or modern guns. Like there's been a lot of people like on some of the forums where, hey, I'm new here and I've never bought a gun in my life. And I just bought a CBA Hawken or whatever,
Yeah.
And you're like, man, where did you come? You got to tell me your life story. And that's not as rare as you would think.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I don't know what triggered that.
I have many theories because I mean that's part of my job. I mean the podcast and talking to people is a lot of fun, but like people that just like that, like you say, I never bought a gun and I just bought a CVA Hawken. Like I want to just sit down and talk to that person for days and try to understand that because, I can talk about, self-reliance and independence and getting hands-on, but it's all kind of theory, I guess, and trying to figure out what people are interested in. But I'm seeing the same thing, that there are people that just come out of nowhere seemingly that are just, boom, I'm into this. Let's go.
Right. And in numbers that give you hope, it's not one or two. I'm seeing it, it's not no huge tsunami, but it's enough that you want to find out like what, like your parents never had a gun in the house.
Yeah.
How did you get here? How did you get here to having a percussion factory gun for 2 weeks and now you're looking at flintlocks.
Yeah.
And, like you're doing kind of how I did when the trigger hit me, and which is like moving fast. And, a lot of the guys do come into the inlines and then make their way to flintlocks. A good percentage of those people do. But I've seen, like on muzzleloading forum, I've seen people knock on the door and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this inline, and the members of the forum point them, well, you're sort of in the wrong place. This is traditional muzzleloading. Go to our sister site, modernmuzzleloading.com. And like half of those people go, oh, okay, well, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
I was thinking about an inline, but this seems cooler. And they stick around, a good percentage of those people stick around. The next thing you know, I just went and bought a percussion gun to hunt with. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And then like they're a new member there and then a regular pretty quick.
Yeah.
So we have had people come like to the forum and at the wrong door and stay.
Yeah. They just say, well,
so there's something appealing even to these younger guys to it, that history is not a thing to a lot of them, and the tradition and the, sort of looking at it from the vantage point of being a history buff and all of that, that's not really where they're coming from. And I really don't know where it is they're coming from.
Yeah.
That's what kind of got me with the sort of the Revenant and the movies and the, Daniel Day-Lewis, and it's gotta be kind of that. Like, my favorite movie was, Last of the Mohicans. And, so I decided to get a gun, and I think I'm going to get one like he had.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I mean, I think there's some of that, but I don't, as far as the future, goes, I think it's positive. I think we're all doing what we can do to sort of, bring more people into it. And I just don't know. I don't know what we can do as far as really bringing a boon to it, but,
right.
But I think people are coming, and I think people don't know. Like, I'm always shocked at the 90% of people that are subscribers to my channel, that every time I post a video when I go do a long rifle show, they're like, I didn't know those existed.
Yeah.
So I think there's the next challenge, getting them to notice traditional muzzleloading, and the next challenge is to get them to kind of see that there's this whole culture out there.
Yeah.
That there's long rifle shows, that there's shoots, that there's groups, that there's somebody else just down the road that does the same thing, and they've been doing it longer.
Yeah.
And they've got the old hat, and the, and the shirt. So, I mean, that's sort of the network, and I don't know how we sort of manage that, kind of introducing these new people to the sort of network that you get into. That's an interesting question.
Yeah. I always like asking because I like to hear what people say, and across the board, I think this is the 32nd or 33rd episode of the podcast, and overwhelmingly it's positive. I don't think I've heard one person say, that we're not going to be doing muzzleloading in 20 years, and I think that's maybe the listeners are sick of hearing it. I don't know, but I think it's a good thing to keep in the back of our minds is, this is an old thing, but there's always more people coming and being interested in it. And I think it's got a bright future. I agree with you. I don't know that we're going to see a boon like we did in 1976 with the bicentennial. I mean, I can hope for that with the sesquicentennial coming up, but I'm okay with a nice, steady, growth year over year, because I think that's how you keep this sport and the hobby and the tradition going.
Right. I completely agree. And I hope, I'm heartened by the number of people that are brand new into it, that are finding my channel, and then through it, the other channels and or the other way around. And there's no shortage of questions from brand new people that got their first gun 3 days ago for me. No shortage of emails. So I'm happy about that. It would kind of stink to, get one email a month from a new guy,
right.
But I'm getting a lot. And so that is heartening. So we'll see. I think it's, like you say, I think there's a bright future. I think it's, I think we may not want to expect, that 1976 peak, but I think we can keep it all going, and I think people enjoy it, and I think people get hooked really quick.
Yeah.
The fangs get kind of sunk in super quick. People just kind of like, man, flintlocks, dude, I'm going to be the coolest guy in my neighbor at my range,
Yeah.
And it's funny too, just on that real quick, the number of guys that are like in town and live in an apartment in the city, and their shooting is all done at their local range, which is an indoor range.
Yeah. And they're rolling up with a flintlock.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're just like, so their whole thing is, I'm fixing to go to my range with my new flintlock and all the regulars there. And I can't wait to tell the person behind the counter that I know on a first name basis about this flintlock, And so that they're kind of coming into it there. Yeah. Which is pretty, I love hearing those stories, because that's like a totally different way than I came into it. So just kind of visualizing that whole scenario is just, it's funny, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Bob, I really appreciate you coming on. I think this was a great conversation. I think we covered everything that I had on my list. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about or plug here? I mean, this is a chance for you to tell people about what you're doing. I'm sure they've heard of you, but if they haven't, where can people find you?
Well, I am not on social media outside of YouTube, so I don't do Facebook or anything, unfortunately.
You're a saner man for it.
Yeah, I try to stay back in my holler and kind of stick with that. So, Black Powder TV on YouTube, Bob at blackpowdertv.com is a great way to get a hold of me. I would like to say one thing: the 4 or 5 or 6 channels that are on YouTube that, a lot of guys know, or they may not know, Duelist 1954, Mike Bellevue's channel, Bill Raby, he does his building videos, and Black Powder Maniac Shooter, I know you've had on. He's been out to the farm here. Leatherwood Outdoors is another guy who does a lot of flintlock hunting videos. And, those guys have been doing it for, like Mike Bellevue, for 10 years. Yeah. And so I'm glad to join that little group. And I think between all of us, we can make some kind of difference, even if it's to help new guys not get discouraged and have a place to go before they sort of find their local network and get out and make it a big part of their, outdoor hobby life. So I'm happy to be there with those guys and help in some way.
Well, we appreciate it, Bob. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, brother.
We'd like to thank Bob again for coming on the show and talking with me. I think the entire unedited conversation ran close to 2 hours. So I'm hoping we can get Bob on the phone again here sometime. I'm looking forward to hopefully having some shows to go to here soon, maybe hit some shows down in his area and meet up in person. We'll have links to everything that Bob talked about in the show notes below. There'll also be in the YouTube channel description for the video, as well as the accompanying blog post at nmlra.org. Remember to use the discount code podcast10 at the NMLRA store. That's going to give you 10% off of merchandise in the NMLRA store. We've got a ton of great books, clothing, and hats on sale right now. If you're interested in gunsmithing at all, this book is just a great example of historical reference, but also how to do it. Even if you're not interested in it, if you're interested in, learning how things are done technically, this is the book for you. We'd like to thank you so much for listening. As we head into the holiday season, I want to let you know that you can become a member of the NMLRA for a special introductory rate now until the end of December. If you like what we do with the podcast and with the YouTube videos, you're going to love the production that goes into Muzzle Blast magazine. The team there has been working super hard on making this year's magazines, I think, some of the best ever produced. I'm saying that as a longtime Muzzle Blast fan. You're going to want to check out that magazine. We've got a lot of great new writers and a lot of great new stories coming on. And don't miss it. Check it out, nmlra.org/join.